Good morning. Welcome to AIA Florida Southwest's 2025 Coffee Talk. I'm Stephen Ruby. I am the host of Coffee Talk. And this breezy morning after a storm, and we're sitting here talking with Brian Ahmedic. Brian is a young emerging professional here in Southwest Florida. He has a master's degree in architecture from University of South Florida School of Architecture and Community Design. Over his years while going to school and before and after, he's worked for a number of architectural firms in Southwest Florida and a number of construction firms. So he's got a background in both in architecture and construction management. He is very involved in AIA. He was initially on the board where he acted as our director of continuing education. He was nominated and elected as vice president in 2023, and now is serving as president of AIA Southwest Florida. During this time, he also was on the membership committee for AIA Florida. He's in the process of completing his licensure, and as we were sitting here talking before the camera went on, he said, by the end of the month, by the end of the year, I'll have it done. He's very ambitious. His personal background, his family migrated in the mid-90s here from Bosnia. He was born in Wisconsin, and the family moved to Naples in the early 2000s. He watched his father and his eldest brother grow careers in architecture and moved to Tampa to get his education, and he's now back home and actually is now running his dad and brother's business as a young professional. So good morning, Brian. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Let's start out with one question.
Okay.
You're a young emerging professional, okay? And you suddenly found yourself, your dad and your brother said, okay, you can take over this and run this firm, and now elected you as the president of the company. What challenges did you face the day you took it over?
That's a great question. Being an emerging professional, I'm still learning the career, and especially at that time, I was fresh into architecture full-time. Wasn't going to school, it wasn't a summer internship, it was full-time learning. And one of the more interesting things and more difficult things to understand was, while learning the practice of architecture, also learning the business of architecture. Because in the business of architecture, there's many moving pieces. The same way there's a project as a project manager. There's many moving pieces, many things you have to coordinate. And one thing that I didn't do so well in the beginning, like I'm sure many may have struggled with, was kind of making sure each piece is where it's supposed to be. It's a functioning machine. And if you don't take care of it, you don't understand the processes that have to go through on the business aspect, as well as practicing architecture. I would say that's a challenge that I still face today, and I don't see it. It's an ever-evolving career, so we're always learning, we're always evolving, and I would say it's probably one of the more difficult things that I've had to stack on top of learning architecture as a practice as well.
Well, I think you were alluding to, it almost seems like your perception of running a business is just like managing a design project, that there are similarities in the process of managing, being a business manager versus being a project manager on a design.
Similar, yes. I mean, with a project, we have to coordinate between multiple entities, between the clients, between the consultants, between contractors, and everybody has to work together as a team to create the product. The same way in a business. One of the best things that I've learned is trust your team and put together a good team that you can allow them to do their portion, you can trust them to do so, and that they do a great job. And that's one thing that I think that has been most helpful for me, is having my team in my firm. They have been supportive. They know what they're doing. A lot of them are older and more experienced than I am, so learning from them as well has been a blessing to me.
That's interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, I assume that many of your employees are older, more experienced. They had, probably a culture that your dad and your brother had instilled in the firm. How did you go about earning their respect and their trust? I was in a situation where I took over a half of a firm when I was 27 years old, right after licensure, and I inherited a team of people who were twice my age, and it was a challenge to gain their respect. So how did you go about doing that?
It is a challenge. It very much so it is. Socrates, a quote from Socrates that I interpreted was, "True wisdom is the understanding of knowing you know nothing." So my interpretation of it was, know what you don't know and work with your team. As a leader of the firm, you still have discussions with everybody. You still talk to, let's say, an architect on your firm or even an intern straight out of college and ask their opinions, ask their thoughts in any given situation. As we all know, in architecture firms, a lot of them are based like studios. So everybody's in a large open room, sitting around each other, having discussions about projects. Sometimes multiple people are in the same project together. And one thing that it's a constant thing, keeping their respect, earning their respect throughout the process. But one thing that I've learned is really asking everybody's opinion. What are their thoughts on things? Allowing everyone in the firm to have a voice, allowing them to have their input, so they also hold some ownership to certain items and certain decisions that are made. And it's not just bossing everybody around. It's difficult to do so as an emerging professional, as I'm learning. Many of them have gone through certain situations and instances or been in or understand a situation better than I do. So having an open line of communication and discussions within your firm, regardless of your experience, age, whatever it may be, I think is a very important factor in making sure that everything runs smoothly and everybody stays happy.
Yeah, I think when you ask people's opinion and they take their ideas and incorporate them into whether it's a business practice or a design, they feel their worth, that they have value.
Yep.
And I think that's the kind of the seeds for that respect and trust. So I think you're doing the right thing. But how about with your clients? The same thing goes with your clients. You're a young guy. They're used to dealing with dad, and all of a sudden, the same clients, and they're looking at this young whippersnapper that maybe they knew as a teenager. And how do you bridge that gap and gain their trust and loyalty?
A lot of it comes from when I was growing up watching my father and my eldest brother. My eldest brother works at a firm in Tampa. My father, obviously, now is a partner with me in this business, is seeing interactions with the clients. As a child, I would tag along with my father to business meetings. I would just sit back and analyze how he speaks to everybody and kind of what he says. And now when one thing I've learned is you have to understand your client personally as much as possible, and you have to understand their vision, because there may be times when their explanation of what they want is a little more abstract, or maybe they have wants and needs that they don't necessarily express. So one thing I've done was get to know them, ask them a few personal questions about their family and what they do to get an understanding of what their needs may be. Try to compile their visions and thoughts into a cohesive design and a track moving forward. And again, tying back into knowing what you don't know is if they ask me a question that I do not know the answer to, my favorite response is, well, I'm not entirely sure, but I'll get that answer for you. And I make sure that once I get back to the office or when available, I provide that answer. And do some research, read some books, ask my team, get an idea from multiple different aspects, and then I let them know. So I have, on the contrary, assumed and said things, and it hasn't worked out in my favor. So I've learned fairly quickly that it's kind of best, even if you know it's kind of best to double check first and relay the correct information to everybody prior to saying it, because accountability is a big thing, and you will be held accountable if you do say something wrong.
It'll come back to haunt you, won't it?
Yes.
Do you find it, I know you do both residential and commercial work, and you work for developers, you work for individual homeowners. Do you find there's a difference in the earning their respect and their loyalty, whether they're somebody doing their own private residence versus a corporate entity doing a commercial project?
Yes, I see a very drastic difference in the sense where if you're doing someone's personal residence, they obviously have a very close relationship with the home, whatever it may be. I mean, as we speak, I'm having construction done in my house, and I never thought I'd be standing over a contractor watching him do some work. But when you're designing someone's residence and getting understanding what they want, a lot of the time, especially in this area, many people want to retire here. This is their lifelong home at the end of the day, or maybe half of it. And you want to get it right. You want, and there's a lot of the time husband and wife or two partners that may be involved in this with differing opinions. So I'm sure we've all ran into that a few
We've all
times.
run into that at least once in our life, right?
On the residential end, especially for someone's personal home, there's a lot of emotions and feelings attached to everything. So you have to take a different approach. When it comes to commercial and corporate entities, a lot of the time, and especially in commercial, we have more codes to abide by. We have rules and regulations that we have to abide by, and that help drive the designs. And corporate entities, you have to shift the thinking to get an understanding of their business model. I like being involved in having the discussions that don't always necessarily pertain to the designs, but to understand their business model, to see what the flow of the business is going to be like, to see what we need to attract their clientele to. So I think it's two different sides when approaching it. And
Agreed.
Yep.
Agreed. So I know your dad is kind of moving away from practice and going to live the good life up in the Carolinas, and you're next generation in line. How do you see a shift in your practice, a shift in maybe how you approach design in your firm, or the clientele you're going after? And if so, how do you envision taking that ship and pointing it in a different direction?
Well, I will say my father set the foundation. He did very well. I mean, for someone who migrated here, did not speak English, worked his way through the ranks, and then built a very successful business. My father did many, many great things, and he honestly set the foundation for everything that we're doing today. And he deserves to take his leave. Now, when it comes to shifting it, I think it ties into how this field always evolves. We're required continuing education for a reason. Everything, building elements and everything start to evolve as we progress and learn more. And that's the same thing I think companies need to evolve and get an understanding of things that they can do better on, how they can shift their thinking and see what works for the firm itself. I'm going to be honest, I've tried to implement some things that just didn't work out well, and on paper it sounded great. I thought it was going to be more functional, increase productivity, and it didn't work out. Now, the most...
But you're not afraid to try.
No, because if you don't try, then you never know.
No.
Failure is a good thing sometimes. Failure is an opportunity to learn. I don't see failure as something to, to move you away from the goal that you're trying to achieve. I think it's okay, well, you learn that this didn't work, how do we change it? And the most important thing I learned was that not every single office is the same. You can't implement one change in an office and expect it to work in the other. It has to do with the team, it has to do with how the firm functions, and understanding how everybody functions and trying to progress, I think, is important. Now, implementing technology is a big one for us. tracking systems, invoicing systems, trying to minimize the amount of, we would say, time wasted on certain tasks and see how we can, quote unquote, automate certain tasks, I think is what we're doing now. My ambitions went a little crazy at first, and I tried changing a whole bunch of things, and that didn't work. So we take a step back, and I've learned that this is a slow process, which is okay, because I believe I have a long career ahead of myself.
How do you think market trends, particularly in residential in Southwest Florida, as we're very trendy. We go through, with the Tuscan and then the, transitional and now the contemporary. Every decade we're kind of rolling out a different. How do you see yourself as a professional responding to those trends? Is it something that you think you want your firm to follow the trends or be the trendsetter and go off in another direction?
Well, I think a little bit of both, because you have to follow the trends, right? Being a young practitioner, I think I'm also in that wave of wanting to change what has been built, want to change it for the better, change the designs. I mean, a lot of these trends will be directed by my generation. And so,
by technology change.
And by technology as well.
Yeah.
And being a part of that, I remember holding the CDs and cassettes and VHS tapes and everything. I'm, not that young, so I still remember that, and seeing how technology progressed and seeing how the way of thinking has progressed and being in it due to my age, I think is probably the most beneficial thing in my aspect. Now I do enjoy kind of straying away from trends and seeing what helps, but evolving with the trends, I think, is a necessity. And I see, especially in this area, given the geolocation that we have and issues like the hurricane, and how do we evolve our design along with, for aesthetics, as well as for the safety of everybody else.
Yep. Agreed. You're running that firm, and you're still studying to take your ARE. We're being very aggressive about it, and that's very good. I would say that's probably a heck of a lot more challenging than if you were an emerging professional with a 9-to-5 job preparing for licensure. So, you're doing something that's probably more challenging than the average emerging professional studying for licensure. What advice would you give somebody who's just working full-time to go through the ARE process efficiently and get their license?
Persistence, I think, is one of the big factors in it. For me personally, I set a goal, right? I want to be a licensed architect. Some may not set that as a goal, but for those who do, I think you have to stay persistent with it. Life is not going to get easier. There's always going to be things that get in the way, but holding yourself accountable to your own goals, finding a good support system, being your local chapter, being other friends that may be studying the exams, and finding a mentor is a big one as well. I would say that my schedule for being very aggressive about this holds me accountable for it. If I choose to study and I do well, great, that's the goal. And if life happens, so to speak, things pop up, business gets busy, personal things may happen, I still hold myself accountable and do my best to pass these exams. And I think the most important thing I would tell anybody is failure is okay. Just because you fail an exam once, twice, maybe a few times, it is okay. It should not discourage you. It did for me a little bit. I will be honest. I took a few months off.
Failure always is discouraging. Yes. You don't go out and celebrate after you fail.
Well, no, but you shouldn't quit, I will say.
That's true.
I will say. It is discouraging. I mean, I just passed, as we talked right before we started, I just passed my exam last week that I failed twice. And sometimes I didn't know what to do, didn't know what to study. I don't know how I could study differently. And that's when I reached out to what I would call my support system. You and I have had discussions about it. I've discussed with my peers, a few members on the board who are also taking their exams, and get their thoughts, because maybe the perspective that I took on it didn't work. But speaking with my peers, they're like, hey, why don't you just read this book or do this? And they've passed the exam. And so I would say that finding a support system is very beneficial because you're not going at it alone. It's a daunting task to get your license in architecture, many exams, many hours of studying, and having, being able to correlate with those that are going through it with you kind of really helps drive
I think that's something that you've encouraged as both Vice President and President of AIA Southwest Florida, is to start these study groups and to get these emerging people who are taking the exam, to get them together and make it possible and have these study groups at various offices. You were very adamant about budgeting for a library of books for the study group. So I think to encourage people taking their exams to get involved with that group. It's a small group. It's 10, 12 folks. But if you're, as you say, if you've taken the exam already and passed the exam, you can be helpful to somebody else. Yep. And I think that's one thing that you and Caitlin did that I thought was a very, very good contribution to AIA Florida.
Yep. I mean, even with AIA, as we all know, being a part of it, the goal is to increase licensed practitioners, increase membership, increase licensed practitioners, get the emerging professionals involved. And one thing that I would encourage everybody, whoever may see this, whether they're in a different state, whether they're in a different chapter, whatever it may be, get involved with your local chapter. I'm sure that many of them, if not all of them, do have resources and libraries to utilize. As we all know, they're not cheap. Every year we have to bump up the budget a little bit on the board just to kind of keep up with the ever-changing volumes and books. And, emerging professionals, there's a lot of struggles financially, especially in this area. So being a part of the AIA for me, and I've seen for the other associates that have been a part of these study groups, it's very helpful. You don't have to worry about necessarily buying all the books, or you don't have to worry about sorting through the endless library of resources. We try to, hone it down to a few to really help give somebody a good track to study for whatever exam may be.
Good advice. Good advice. You're definitely on, not only on the track, but already firm principal. And that's going to be your career goal. Not everybody has the aspiration of having their own firm or starting their own firm. But for those young architects who might be toying with the idea about starting their own firm, what advice would you give to them, either as encouragement or don't do it?
Well, I'll never tell anybody don't do it, but I would say take your time. One thing is take your time. Find a mentor, find someone who's experienced, get an understanding of the business portion of architecture. That's one thing that many don't realize. That you could be a principal in a firm, you could run a team, you could run multiple projects at a time, but the business aspect of it is a whole nother world as well. It's like any business. I was fortunate enough to find mentors in the AIA, one being yourself, and having a support system around you, because there's many days when you're drowning. You're getting phone calls, you can't do what you're supposed to do today, you've got this and that to take care of, and I learned by trial by fire. Making mistakes, you hold yourself accountable, you fix them to the best of your abilities, but I would say take your time. I wouldn't change anything if I could go back, because I'm proud of where I'm at now. It's just a support system is very important, especially if you're a young practitioner, you start your own firm. There's going to be a lot of things you don't realize you need or didn't think about when putting it all together.
Well, I think probably it was very much like young professionals graduating. I wanted to design and do buildings. I never thought I would own my own firm, and never say never.
course.
Because eventually it evolved, and that the opportunity provides itself, and you do it. So I would say keep your options open for yourself.
Of course.
But I think one thing, you're talking about the business aspects. I think one thing that I think we as architects sometimes devalue is marketing. Sometimes we are too humble. We don't talk about ourselves. We don't talk about what we do. And if you're looking for clientele in a broad range and a diverse clientele, if you don't market yourself, nobody's going to know who you are and where you are. So yeah.
Yep.
How do you go about marketing? How do you deal with that aspect of your business?
That's something new that we're implementing. So, it's not always necessarily putting ads out anywhere else. One thing I would say is, if you do a good job, you practice architecture well, you let your work speak for itself, but you want to make sure that gets out to everybody else, whether it be on social media. I mean, marketing nowadays is, you could do all of it from an iPhone. You could do everything from your iPhone. There's so much technology out there, and there's so many platforms: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I mean, they're endless. It's understanding what clients and potential clients want to see. It's not always just the pretty picture. Sometimes it's just the empty plot of land, and then the pretty picture, understanding doesn't matter where this may be, we can design something to your needs and to your wants and to your aesthetic. So I would say it's not an easy thing to do, but the technology's on our side, and there's many platforms to be able to do it on.
Yeah. I think the key is to understand what your firm's specialty is and to brand yourself and get that. Why are you special than any other firm? And you can just putting your projects out there doesn't necessarily do that. You need to be able to get your niche that nobody else does it as well as you do, and I think that's the key to marketing. Whether you do it on Instagram or you take ads or you have a balloon floating around with your name on it during the football game, So, good advice to young professionals. Hadn't to kind of wrap up here, a couple of questions left yet. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? In your career, or in your personal life, or whatever? Where will you be, and what will you be doing in 10 years?
I'll still be doing this. I'll still be doing architecture. Still want to be running a firm. I think I want to expand my firm in a sense to open up offices in different areas. We're in a beautiful area. I mean, we're lucky to be here in Naples and the Fort Myers area. But there's so many other places that are still yet not as developed, not as well known, and in the progress of doing so. So I would say hopefully have a couple offices throughout in Sarasota, maybe Tampa, and a few other places. That's ideally the goal. I've had to bring my ambitions down a little bit recently. But yeah, I keep doing what I'm doing now. Obviously evolve as a firm, evolve as a person and a practitioner. Get more involved in the AIA when it's feasible. This is a great organization, and I see myself being a part of it for the long run. And so as my firm evolves and we open up other offices, have office people who run the offices, and be able to really kind of expand the business, I'd like to get more involved in the AIA as well, because the amount of work that this organization is doing for the advocacy of our profession, protecting our profession, and the people you meet in this profession, it's quite amazing. So I see myself kind of moving up the ranks, hopefully, in the future.
And there's definitely value added to membership, because it's not only important to you personally for your development, it's not only important to your firm, but it's important to the profession on a whole.
Great.
It's a give back.
Agreed.
So I'm glad to hear that AIA is going to be part of your 10-year plan.
I've made it this far. I can't quit now.
Well, just you've been dabbling in this at the state level, and I think you can see the kind of the path, the leadership path that you could follow at the state level, and then even onto the national level. So it's great at your age that you've experienced that and kind of see where your opportunities could be in the future.
Yep. And I see being this involved at this age gives me a perspective of what was done in the past, learning from everybody who's been in this organization for a while, and hopefully being a leader in this organization, being involved as early as I am. Not many get to be president of the chapter at this age, so looking forward to it.
Great. Last question, and I ask everyone I sit down with for these coffee talks this question. What accomplishment in your career are you the most proud of? Even though your career may be short, you've got to have something that you're proud of.
Two things I would say. One, that I never quit or strayed away from my goals, regardless of how difficult it got. And two is something that I've realized more recently. It doesn't have to do with me necessarily. Is allowing my team members to have ownership of their projects and their designs, and seeing the final product when we do the walk, or when we get to see people inhabit the spaces that we design, just how happy they are being the ones that made it. And it's like I sit back and I see them smile because everybody else is enjoying the space and the aesthetics of it. That's one thing that keeps me going day in and day out.
And that's one thing that will keep a cohesiveness in your firm. Not only, so you have every right to be proud of that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking.
Brian, thank you so much for your time this morning.
It's always a pleasure.
I know we just skirted around a hurricane and it's breezy here, but thank you for coming in this morning and having this discussion.
Of course. It's always a pleasure.